A closer look at an outbreak that raced through a pork processing plant in Alberta earlier this year. 3 people died, more than 500 workers were infected at the Olymel plant in Red Deer. It is the largest supplier of pork in the country. Workers there are being vaccinated now, but they're also speaking out about the outbreak at the plant. With us this morning is Joel Dryden in Calgary. Back with us, Joel has been part of an ongoing investigation into the kinds of situations in meat processing plants, and we've spoken to you before, so Joel, fantastic to have you back on this latest situation. Again, not the first time that we've talked about a large COVID outbreak at a meat processing plant. The Cargill story was one that has dominated a lot of reporting. Is what's going on and what has been going on at Olymel similar to what we know happened at Cargill?
Good morning. Yeah, it's similar in a lot of ways. And, the big thing I think that we heard from workers and their union was that they really wanted this plant to close a lot sooner than it actually ended up closing. In both instances, at both Olymel and at Cargill, the provincial government didn't step in to get these plants to close. And at both plants, hundreds of workers tested positive for the virus and 3 deaths were linked to each facility. And one thing that we heard from the workforce at these plants, and these plants consist largely of first-generation Canadians and specifically Filipinos, is that specifically the Filipino community felt blamed for this outbreak.
Felt blamed. That's interesting. I mean, many of the workers I know have been speaking to you specifically about their own experience. Can you give us some of those details?
Sure, yeah. I mean, work in a slaughterhouse is a difficult and challenging job, even when there's not a pandemic going on. It's a plant like Olymel has a very high injury rate. And, most workers have some form of injury. Carpal tunnel is very common, but then there are also more bloody incidents too. And experts have talked about the mental strain of working in a facility like this, especially when you're seeing so many of your coworkers get injured and you're surrounded by dead or dying animals on a daily basis. It can really wear you down. And, then you add a pandemic onto that. And in a facility in which workers say it's just not possible to physically distance in certain scenarios.
Listening to this and thinking back to our conversation about Cargill, I mean, it seems instructive. Are there lessons from what has happened in these massive meat processing plants when it comes to the whole question of essential workers, Joel, industrial workplaces across the country?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, we have been looking into specifically meat processing plants, but this is the story of essential workers across Canada at, the Amazon warehouse or, migrant farm workers in Ontario. But, one Filipino community activist who we spoke with, who has also been assisting workers when it comes to their mental health, he says that this can really be a learning opportunity in so many ways, but specifically in his view, it's an opportunity to center the voices of workers who are often invisible.
Joel, thank you very much for the time this morning. Again, as you continue to investigate this, Joel Dryden from Calgary this morning. And if you want to follow more on the story and read more, Joel is one of the authors for an interactive online story that's up online for you today called The Human Machine. And you find it there at CBCNews.ca.